Much appreciated. We meet usually twice a month between our offices, and currently virtually, of course. And it's a combination of the commercials of the Calabasas market share, West Side, which is in Westwood, and Long Beach and South Bay. So people kind of jump in.
And Studio City.
And Bridget, of course, let's not forget Studio City, okay? And Studio City. So great to have you, David. And those of you who, I mean, first of all, thank you to Michael 𝐑𝐞𝐚𝐡 for making the introduction between me and and David. And he should be on the call. I know that he's trying to close, or I don't know, put an escrow of 50 mil right now. So he's on the other line. But David is with AEW Capital Management in the private equity acquisitions group. In the last few years, he's been doing deals in the Partners Group, which is that's the AEW, taking care of the fund, all the big money. Partners builds and acquires deals across the West Coast and Southwest, which is a pretty big territory, from building distribution centers for Amazon in Denver to multifamily in Sacramento to offices in San Francisco. And I also believe, David, you mentioned that next year you'll be moving to a new role specializing in the Bay Area and Pacific Northwest acquisitions with a focus on office and industrial. In that role, you'll be dealing across the risk spectrum, core value add, and separate accounts. Did I miss anything? I mean, you have more virus background, of course, very impressive. So we'd love for you to kind of take it from here.
That was very thorough. Thank you. So I don't have a lot to add in terms of my background. That's pretty comprehensive. Just a little bit more about AEW, I suppose. We're a private equity firm. We manage around $80 billion worth of capital on behalf of mostly institutional clients, some super high net worth. We have various product lines. We have discretionary funds, which is historically what I've worked out of. We have separate account clients. We have core clients, value add clients, opportunistic. We have a REIT division. They invest in public companies. So there are all kinds of products that we manage. We also do all different kinds of product types, particularly within the big ones, office and industrial. We're starting to look at a little bit more retail now. We're looking at hotels now for the first time in a while. So we have a pretty broad mandate, and we can do some more niche products as well. Cold storage, and we have a senior housing division. In terms of my particular role, so as many said, I'm going to be moving into a more specialized role, doing more specific Bay Area acquisitions, but I'm still going to be present in California, doing deals in California. So in Southern California, I should say. So I'll still be around. Historically, it's been kind of all over the map in the Southwest for me. And so, we'll see how the distribution goes in terms of my focus. Many had sort of asked me to speak a little bit about what we're seeing and what we're focusing on and sort of the investment strategy for the firm. So I'll sort of get into that a little bit. Hopefully it's helpful to provide a little bit of insight, and then I'm happy to answer any questions if anybody wants to get into it a little bit more. So in terms of our strategy, broadly speaking, and a lot of this is related to some of the more discretionary funds, because some of the separate account clients tend to have more niche strategies. So for example, we have clients that only want core office buildings in A+ markets. So those are a little bit one-off. But in terms of broad, big picture, the overall strategy is to pursue what we call a barbell strategy. So we're looking for relatively safer investments on the one hand. Typically, we're looking for industrial and multifamily in A and B markets. And on the other hand, we're looking to acquire distressed assets. So that's, participating preferred equity in retail or subordinated JV in hotels, or just acquiring them straight out. At the moment, right now, we're not seeing a lot of good pure acquisition opportunities in distressed areas. Typically, we're seeing sponsors and operators looking for structured financing, sometimes very expensive structured financing. I mean, we're seeing hotels at a 15 to 20% coupon sometimes in A markets, and so those are opportunities that we're pursuing in order to sort of diversify the risk of the fund. We're tending to stay away from things that are in the middle, and so by that I mean office product. Sorry, by that I mean pure office product. I mean senior housing. We're sort of staying away from for now. Things that have a little bit more uncertainty around them, unless they are really compelling opportunities. In terms of office, we're looking at life science a lot. And I'm happy to get into the specifics of life science a little more if anybody wants to talk about it. Particularly in San Francisco, it's really the only aspect of office that's alive at the moment. So that's a little bit of a sort of niche. I would say that the firm is being very selective with our investments. And so we've made a couple of investments that are not really thematic. So for example, we've made an investment in single family for rent product. That plays off the COVID theme of people wanting more space and moving out to the suburbs. These are themes that we're seeing in terms of people working from home a little bit more, moving into areas with more space, and also and sort of reducing exposure to urban areas. Interestingly, in terms of multifamily, which I imagine a lot of you have some exposure to, our multifamily product in some of the suburbs is doing extremely well. So for example, we're building a multifamily product in Sacramento. It's in the suburbs, it's doing extremely well. Our competitive, the competitive product in downtown Sacramento is getting crushed. And that's a theme we're seeing in several markets. It's not just in Sacramento. And that sort of flight away from urban cores, some people are saying it's overblown. I don't think it's particularly overblown. I think that there's a real move away from urban cores as people work from home and they want more space to live in. And companies cycle to more accommodative work from home policy. Office is going to be an interesting sort of byproduct of this, where on the one hand, if people want less dense offices, that will increase the demand for office space. But if you work from home 2-3 days a week, that would reduce the demand. And we're not exactly sure where it's going to fall out. The uncertainty is causing us to sort of stay away from that for now. In terms of sponsorship, we're focusing a little bit more on JVs with sponsors that we know well, we've done business with before, or that are sort of have a established track record. Execution for us is very important right now, given all the uncertainty, particularly around timing of construction, which can be very difficult at the moment. We're seeing long delays in many of our projects, 2, 3, 4 months sometimes, and that comes with increased cost, and so we're being very careful about that. What else can I say? We're also doing a lot more lending, I would say, in the present than we've historically done. And part of that is to reduce risk, and part of that is to generate strong returns at a sort of predictable coupon. What else can I say? Manny, do you want me to keep going, or should I sort of open this up? I feel like I've touched on a lot of different things now. And
well, I think you ran a lot of good topics. I love the fact that you share some insight from a big player out there. For example, stats like that there's more kind of migration to the suburbs versus the core, and more of the multifamily versus something else. And kind of you still questioning the fact that offices, what the future with that, and you justify the you put one-liners, but those are like really solid facts, and that's what pretty much I wanted to get some insight. from, once again, like a big player out there, just to get some kind of idea. You can keep going. People can ask questions. I also did see that Michael Cochet just joined, and thanks again, Mike, for the introduction.
Hey,
What's up?
how you doing, man?
How you doing, my brother?
Good to see you.
Likewise, likewise. Thank you for taking the time and sharing all the insights with all of us, man.
Thank you for having me on. It's my pleasure.
Yeah, tell us what we know what you shared, what you're seeing, but any kind of advice that you can give everybody, I think would be helpful.
Yeah, one of the interesting things is as somebody who comes from a real estate family office background, meaning my family, and seeing that compared to AEW and sort of the two different approaches, one of the fascinating differences has been cash management. So if you work for an institution, you basically have unlimited cash, and your perspective is extraordinarily different from when you work for a family office. So there are certain product types where if you have the cash to float it, and in certain markets as well, where, for example, the San Francisco office market is particularly bad. Most hotels, I think this would be true for, where if you're an institution, you can afford to look at this over 5 years and say, we'll float it for however many years, and if we need to write checks, we'll write checks. If you're a family office, that's probably not going to be feasible. And if you go into that with that approach, you're going to run some risks and have some problems. And so I think people have to think about things in terms of cash management. You can't just go into something and assume that your cash flow is going to cover, because in many product types and in many markets, it's not going to, and you're going to have to write checks. For us, it's not a problem. For a family office like my family, that would be an issue. It's something that we don't really think about often. I mean, it's kind of a formality. We just submit a request to our accounting team. But if we didn't have, a $1 billion fund, that would be a huge issue.
If you could put on your family hat right now, right? Because, not too many people are playing in the institutional space right now, but if you could put on your family hat, what are the things that you're seeing for that portfolio specifically? Like, the smaller buildings or the retail or the office, some of the family holdings like here in LA in the West Coast area. What are you seeing a lot of right now?
Yeah, so I think it varies by product type. For retail, one of the things that we're seeing is there are a lot of tenants who are attempting to drag things out. And so they're not paying rent, or they basically play a little bit of a game of chicken, like, sue me and try to get what you can. For an institution, that's fine, because you can afford a 12 to 18 month process to, rip their eyes out. For a family office, and the time that it takes to sue a tenant, collect your damages, and then collect your attorney fees, you could be dead. And so family offices, I'm seeing, or I'm imagining, are making concessions where institutions are not, to collect cash up front rather than go after something on the back end. I think that's somewhat true in office as well, although it's obviously the situation is not quite as bad. Family offices, I'm seeing sort of, you would like the certainty of a lease term, for example. So you would make a deal where the tenant would extend their lease term, because you would imagine that in 20, for example, if a tenant expired in 2 years, you would imagine that at that point in time, the leasing market was better. So you would get 2 years of additional term and then give the concession, up front, which you're probably not going to get back anyway, rather than going after the tenant and bankrupting them. So there are things like that where there are win-wins for everybody involved, where an institution wouldn't necessarily care about, providing some concession and, in order to collect what they can today. I think it's more important to focus on today's cash needs, when you're negotiating with tenants who, are being difficult, if you're a family office. A lot of this also depends on the approach of the lender, obviously.
That was going to be my next question, is what are you seeing on the debt side of things? Like, I know you get to see it from both worlds. You get to see it from, the $1 billion standpoint, but then you also get to see it from the family office. So curious to ask what you're seeing there.
Yeah, So first of all, it varies by lender. On the institutional side, lenders are much more willing to work with AEW than they are with a family office, obviously. So we haven't had a lot of difficulty with our lenders, even though, candidly speaking, we have one or two properties that we're very nervous about.
Which ones? Which ones? I'm curious to ask. Which ones?
I'll tell you after the call. Call me after it. I'll tell you everything.
Can you tell us what kind of product it is, just so we get a sense of what concerns you, if it's multifamily or office?
I'll tell you that it's not industrial and it's not multifamily.
Okay.
Those two product types have been very good for us.
Okay, cool.
Really across the board. But pretty much universally, lenders have been very willing to work with us. We have a few assets, retail and hotel assets, that I don't personally work with, but I know, have been a little bit troubled. But even then, I think it's a very straightforward give and take. Like, are you going to foreclose or are you not? In the family office setting, and this is not direct experience. This is just things I'm sort of hearing. There are some lenders who are willing to forbear 3 months, 6 months. I mean, this was much more of an issue a couple months ago, and there are some lenders who basically are not giving any flexibility, and they're sort of ripping your eyes out. And at the heart of it, I think, is the question of asking yourself whether the lender really wants to take over the property and foreclose. Because that's really where things are going with some of AEW's properties. That is the case. I mean, the lender actually does want to foreclose, and there's not much you can do if that's the case. If the lender doesn't want to foreclose, then you can sort of push it.
Has anything been I'm curious, not in your portfolio, have you heard of anything so far getting foreclosed?
No, I've heard of a few things that potentially could be, but I'm not sure about the details.
Because we hear about, you see on the headlines that foreclosures are going to come, and so I'm curious to ask if you've seen anything yet.
Not yet. Lenders have been very patient, and there's a lot of money out there that's coming in at very, very high rates, particularly in institutional product and providing bridge financing. We're one of the sources of that capital. There's a lot of people coming in at double-digit coupons at a 75% leverage point, 80% leverage point, which would have been insane a year ago. And they're helping to sort of bridge it until there's more cash flow. And I would say both for family office and for an institution, that capital is a very good source to, particularly if a lender doesn't want to work with you, there's a lot of that money out there at all different sizes. And people sort of looking to hit their returns in the near term. So
interesting. I'd love to get a temperature check from anybody that wants to ask some questions. I really I'm fascinated to hear any questions from anybody. Feel free, big, small, retail, hospitality, whatever. Throw it out there. Not all at once now.
Let them digest for a second. But no, it's a good platform, guys, to ask questions. You have David on the call. Thanks again, David. Mike on the call. We have other, big producers over here. So it's always good to kind of share the thoughts and the ideas and anything that you see out there. I'm just curious to know. Go for it.
I have a question. David, what do you think? What is your anticipation for the interest rate and the liquidity as far as the Feds are concerned? What do you see coming next 3-6 months, please?
As far as the Federal Reserve is concerned?
Interest rates and liquidity and all the money that they're injecting in the economy, do you think it's going to continue? And do you think the rates may even fall further? Just wondering, what's your opinion?
I think so. I mean, this is really sort of my own opinion now. I don't think AEW has specific thoughts on, I'm sure we do, but we don't really talk about it a lot. on Federal Reserve liquidity? I think so. I would be very surprised if the liquidity in the system sort of stopped. A lot of the issue has been not really from the government liquidity perspective. It's been from banks and other lenders refusing to lend, sort of being out of business for a while. At the moment, we're seeing lenders be very selective about what they do. If you're a developer, that could be more difficult to get cheap financing. Lenders these days, what we're seeing, just tend to want more cash flow. There's more of a focus on cash flow or sort of certainty of cash flow. And so that's why, refinancing a hotel could be very difficult these days. If you have a cash flowing multifamily asset or a fully leased industrial property or an office building that's, like we're looking at an office building right now to purchase potentially that is pre-leased 50% to a Fortune 100 company. We're not going to have any problem financing that. Even though in the near term, there's not a lot of cash flow because they have like 12 months of free rent or something insane. So a lot of the focus has been on cash flow from the lending perspective. Again, I mean, to answer your original question, I don't think we're going to have liquidity issues from the Fed. It's just banks that are having a lot of balance sheet difficulty and they're choosing not to overextend themselves, I think.
Do you think they may ease up a little bit in future? I mean, near future?
The Fed or the banks?
No, the banks, I meant, sorry.
I think so. I mean, over the last couple of months, they've eased up a lot. 3-4 months ago, it would have been difficult to even finance a credit deal. I mean, there was, for example, Visa has a campus in the Bay Area, and it was very difficult to get that financed by one bank. Where it's Visa, right? So you have super credit. Pre-COVID, there were multiple banks lining up to do the whole thing. Post-COVID, nobody wanted to do the whole thing, and even then, the rate was higher. And that was 3-4 months ago. Well into it. That's not the case anymore. You could get that financed. So slowly things are easing up. I think that just continues.
Thank you.
Do you think that the vaccine is going to play a role in interest rates in the coming, because they're slowly rolling it out. So I'm curious to ask if you think vaccine is going to, cause the stock market or any kind of changes like that.
I'm not sure I feel qualified to answer that question. That's a tough one.
So like I got a scenario right now where, we have a deal under contract and the buyer is going to pay the prepayment penalty because the rate, the rate that they have locked in right now is like up in the mid 4.5s. And so he's basically contingent all the way into the end based on his prepayment penalty. And he told me that I'm really concerned with how, what kind of a prepay we're going to get at the end based on how the vaccine is rolling out and how the stimulus packages are rolling out and how that can affect the stock market and how it can affect interest rates. And, he explained to me his thought process there. So, I'm curious to see if that's been given any thought or anything like that.
Only in the context of where we think the economy will go, very broadly speaking. And it's very broad. I mean, we don't really think about, at least not our team. I mean, we have a public market team at AW and they think about this stuff, but we don't really think about public markets in our groups. We think about it, recovery and so on. We obviously have some thoughts about the recovery. I mean, the concerns here are that the recovery is moving very fast, but sort of tapers off where there's a number of people who are going to get their jobs back immediately, even after a vaccine, but there are some people who became unemployed, and even with the vaccine, those people will not necessarily be immediately reemployed. There's a certain portion of jobs that are, quote unquote, permanently lost. Will take longer to, so it's a bit of a sort of very, very steep and then flattening out like that. So it's not really a direct answer to the question. It's kind of just the perspective on economic recovery and the impact of the vaccine. It's a very difficult.
I know.
It's a very difficult question to answer.
Excuse me a few minutes, guys.
I wanted, oops.
Uh,
I wanted
other questions, guys? To David? David, how can this group be a source for you, if anything?
Well, I think first of all, thank you very much again for having me on. I mean, it's really it's a pleasure, and I'm very flattered that you had me on. So thank you. Um, in terms of what what would be helpful to us, I mean, a couple of things. Firstly, you guys are you and Michael and the rest of the team are a much deeper connection to the markets that you specialize in than we are, because we have to cover a much larger geographical area, and so we have our own experiences, and we have the conversations and the market experience that we have. But for example, I'm never going to be as plugged in to Los Angeles as Mike is, just by the nature of all of the areas that I have to cover. And so having that kind of specialized knowledge and just sharing back and forth is very helpful. And then moving a step further, I've sort of shared a little bit of what we're looking for in terms of acquisition opportunities. So to the extent that you think anything would be a good fit, for us, and also to the extent that there are people out there who are experiencing distress and they have product that is appealing and they're just undercapitalized, we have capital. And so we have capital, and we like to deploy it. And so if there are people who need money and we can provide that for them, an attractive rate of return, and that's a win-win for us. And so hopefully we continue the conversations both with you and Mike, and happy to anybody else who's on the call. And then to the extent that we can partner with anybody, that would be great as well.
So I got two unique questions for you. My first one is, when you're looking at a multifamily acquisition opportunity, are you digging deeper into the applications of the actual tenants right now? Or are you just looking at the terms and payment history? Or are you actually looking at what they do for a living yet?
That's very specific. So that's sort of a down the line diligence question. The process for us is to start at the high level. We look at the returns and we look at the acquisition profile. If it was a rent controlled acquisition opportunity, we'd get more into that up front. If it was, a newer product, we wouldn't care about that as much on the front end. We'd sort of get into that later because it's not as much of a risk.
Okay, and then my second question here is a little bit deviating, but if you can name us off the last 3 acquisitions of AEW. Doesn't have to be in California, and it could be any kind of product.
Okay, let's see. Let me pull a couple of things up. So one of them, I'm gonna give sort of broad overviews. So one of them was, here we go. This was in Baltimore. This was a industrial development in Baltimore. Let's see, what was the next one? This one was what is this deal? 3-story garden style multifamily in Miami.
How big was that? What was the price tag on that thing?
This one was $200,000 a unit, $57 million check size.
57.
Right, and we assume very conservative financing. We assume 50% debt.
Interesting.
And then here's another one. This is a portfolio industrial sale leaseback opportunity in several states. This was Pennsylvania, Illinois, Oregon.
Interesting. And how big was that?
That one was 1.7 million square feet, 100% leased, $140 million acquisition. In-place cap rate was low 5%.
Okay. And the deal that comes to mind that you lost out on in the past 3 months?
We lost out on in the past 3 months that I liked.
Yes.
There was a relatively low leverage hotel recap in the Bay Area. We could have been into the deal for 70% of cost, not even, I mean, who knows what the value is, but 70% of cost, probably somewhere between a 15 to 20% coupon, class A plus hotel. And it's just because they were having some serious issues with capital structure. And we lost out on that deal for a variety of reasons, but that would have been a fun little deal.
What was the check size on that one?
I think we were contemplating somewhere between 20 and 25 million, depending on the specifics.
Okay, so it wasn't the check size that you were attracted to in a sense, it was more of the opportunity that surrounded it.
Right, although that check size is not tiny. I mean, if you consider a typical acquisition at a 65% leverage point, 25 million would be a $75 million acquisition. So not, right, because you lever it up. So that would have been pure equity out the door for us.
Interesting.
Yeah. So analogous to, $60 or $70 million acquisition with 65% financing, like that in terms of check size.
65%. Okay. That I was waiting for like a real juicy one, like 400, 500 million dollar, portfolio.
We talked about one of those today, and someone said, "Are we really going to spend $400 million on this?" And someone else said, "Not really." So we passed.
Well, Starwood took out a good one not too long ago. It was like 2,000 units. That was great.
We actually did look earlier this summer. We looked at U.S. Bank Tower, which Silverstein ended up buying for, I think, $300 a foot. And
yeah, that was a good buy, actually.
Yeah, that you said in the last 3 months, but generally speaking, that was earlier. That I really, really wanted to do that deal. $300.
Did you take a swing on Schwo's building, the Transamerica?
No, we already have enough problems.
Oh man. Well, these are big swings. The U.S. Bank Tower in downtown. It's a big swing, especially with everything going on right now.
Big swing. I mean, I from my perspective, LA downtown office is just a basis play. It almost doesn't matter what's going on. We underwrote it. We looked at the tenants, but at $300 a foot, it's difficult to believe that you'll lose money on that deal. So I liked it.
Did you write on it?
It was a big swing.
Did you write on it?
Did
you write an offer on it?
Silverstein was handling the process. We were talking about partnering with them as equity.
Got it.
So they were doing all the offers.
Got it. I have let's see if Jason's here. Jason, are you on the call?
Yeah, he just joined in.
Yeah, I'm here.
I want you to ask some of your big swinging questions to my friend David. Jason handles a lot of the San Diego area. Is that a market that you're playing in right now, David?
Personally, I don't think no. I don't do a lot in San Diego. So I apologize if I don't have a lot of a lot of insight into what's going on down there.
Okay. Well, we need Jason is very he's very affluent with Long Beach and San Diego and that whole area. He knows it very well. He recently took we we were heading down a big path that way, that people are holding on to their properties. Are you seeing that a lot more where people are reluctant now, or are you seeing more inventory come out?
Good question.
No, are you asking me or are you asking Jason?
I'm asking you, man.
Yeah, well, that's one of the reasons why we're seeing so much opportunity to put out structured financing, because there's a reluctance to sort of sell outright, at least at the purchase prices that we would want to buy at. And so, meeting in the middle is just, like you need something, you can't just hold it the way you're holding it. So, okay, we'll come provide you with high leverage debt.
So you're seeing a lot more people reluctant to sell opposed to new inventory getting released.
Yeah, it's one of the reasons why we haven't done as many sort of distressed opportunities, just because there are not a lot of people who are putting their properties on the market as distressed. They tend to, prefer to try saving them, levering up and saving them, or attempting to.
Okay, and then are you seeing an upswing in developments?
No, actually, for several months, we saw basically complete stop in developments, at least in the markets that we see. So I can speak specifically to several markets in greater depth. San Francisco was just a complete stop for a minute, and it's starting back up slowly in fits and starts. That's mostly related to their shelter-in-place problems, but we ourselves, were put on hold for a while. In Colorado, we do a bunch of industrial out there. Everything stopped for 3 or 4 months, just completely stopped. And now we're seeing some more development starting to break ground. In Las Vegas, I'm not sure if it ever really stopped. It just kind of slowed down a little bit, but now it's back in full swing. So people are developing out there, and they're very happy to develop out there. I think a lot of it is just market by market. I don't think there were any markets where there was more development necessarily. There were some markets where it slowed down, some markets where it didn't really slow that much. At this point, anything that was sort of underway has picked back up and is going. And there are some things that had not broken ground and have started to do so.
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm curious to know, like, if they do another lockdown in any states, does that also hold back construction? Does that mean that we're going to see, construction stop in the middle, essentially if they have already broken ground, and that trickles down to so many other places, because if they stop construction after they've broken ground, then that means those workers are unemployed or furloughed in a sense. And that trickles down to rent payments or home buying or so many different areas,
Right. Are you seeing developers, excited to move dirt and break ground?
So it's funny you asked that. I got off the phone with a developer today that just gave me a price. So he doesn't want to develop. He'd rather just sell it. And then I talked to another guy last week who's open to selling kids, and that was like in Salt Lake City, so, and then, there are other groups that I talk to, like, Fairfield and stuff like that, and they're just pushing forward. And then Graystar, spoke to Graystar, and they got these crazy asses got 50 active developments going. They're nothing stopping them, man.
Wow. Good for them.
So it's, I'm seeing a mix. I see people that are like, I don't want to enter that world. I'd rather just exit now. I'm seeing people that don't even want to go into the entitlement world. And then I see groups that are like, hell yeah, let's go now. This is going to take 2 years, so we might as well start now.
Right. Depending on where you are, that would make sense. If you're in Los Angeles, it makes all the sense in the world. If you're in Texas or Colorado or something like that, where your entitlements take 3 months or 6 months at the worst, then right, then there's less of a rush.
Yeah. And I'm seeing also a question that has popped up recently, which is, what kind of job markets are near certain sites? So like, I was working on a deal in Texas, and I've come to realize, because I'm still new in learning different markets, different areas. And there was like an oil and mining company that just signed a lease right across the street. So they're like, because of that security and it's an essential job, that it makes the acquisition just a little bit more tasteful for anybody else looking at it. If there's, no job growth in that market, it makes it a little bit more difficult, to analyze, an opportunity. So.
Interesting. I think from our perspective, we tend to think of those dynamics in terms of new development for multifamily product, and so for example, there are some markets where companies are building new campuses, and so this is not like a revolutionary thought. We just we just tend to prefer to develop in proximity to those campuses. I don't think we've looked at a lot of opportunities where there's been that kind of interplay between tenant and job market. It's very specific, but it makes a lot of sense.
Do you think that we're going to see the retail apocalypse in Los Angeles?
Do I think that
we're going to see the retail apocalypse?
What do you mean we are going to? We already seen it. It's been tough.
It's I'm really, I'm friends with Jay Lux, and even he tells me it's just like, if you're not in Beverly Hills where they're paying $10,000 a square foot, it's scary right now from a retail perspective. And you have this new moratorium where it's not on multifamily, but you have it on the retail until March 31st in LA County. So you can't evict anybody in a retail location until then. And they have like zero help. And now they have this new shutdown. So I just talked to them yesterday about it, and it's scary.
Yeah, the new shutdown is, in my opinion, very sad.
Do you think, either from AEW or from your own family office's perspective, you would be interested in retail, and why not in the coming 3 months?
I think the right retail we would be. The real question is whether it's still going to be retail in 3 to 5 years. I think what we're seeing, particularly with AEW, is a lot of retail conversions to either, depending on the location, land value, like covered land, or distribution, like hybrid distribution, or even sometimes converting it, scraping it, or building something else. So it's really, replacement cost is not the best metric for retail, because for replacement cost to be valid, you have to actually want to replace it with the same product. So that's the question. I mean, I think undoubtedly there are certain retail that will survive as retail and even thrive when there's less competition from retail that doesn't make it. But you have to cherry pick and make sure that you're selecting wisely. It's not going to be as easy as other product types.
Are you more reluctant now to put out offers than before?
I'm going to say yes, but largely in the context of AEW specific dynamics. One of them is that the fund that I have been working out of just raised a new fund, and so with a new fund, we just finished the final close, and so up until the final close, there's a lot of reluctance to put out the money that's been raised sort of halfway, just in terms of the investor dynamics. And the second is that this transition, there's been a transition in terms of consolidating a number of different people among the, across the private equity platform, and so that integration has sort of taken a lot of time and attention internally. So I don't think it's necessarily as a result of what we're seeing in the market. A lot of it is just sort of internal to us.
Makes sense. I was expecting you to say, more reluctant since the world is ending.
I mean, I would say we're actively looking for opportunity, because we believe that opportunity exists. I think 4 or 5 months ago we were a lot more reluctant, and at this point right now, I think we're seeing things become a little bit more predictable. And so for sure, over the last 30 to 45 days, we've become tremendously more active. And we're starting to look at, I've looked at a bunch of life science deals in the Bay Area. I've looked at some multifamily construction in the Bay Area. I'm looking at some multifamily construction in Van Nuys. I'm looking at some multifamily construction in Las Vegas right now. A number of different things, and the volume of it has really picked up. Some industrial development. So there's a chat. Do you think supermarket anchor shopping centers, self-storage opportunities are smart investments at the moment? Self-storage. So self-storage is interesting. I mean, I think first of all, it's actually a theme that we like quite a lot. It's difficult to do at an institutional scale, unless you're sort of a specialist in that space. So for us, we like it. We're not exactly sure how to execute it, but on a more family office scale, it's great. Supermarket anchored shopping centers, I really think it just depends on the center. I mean, if you're going to go retail, that's probably the safest way to go. But if you have like a 600,000 square foot center anchored by 50,000 square foot supermarket, that's very different from a strip mall. So I think retail is very specific.
Interesting.
David,
Let's open it up for any questions.
you guys, if you have other questions, Jason?
Yeah, I have a question. This is Jason from San Diego, from Long Beach. Are you seeing an increase in incentives from the federal government as it relates to affordable housing development and these retail centers that need to be repurposed? Because there's a lot of them going on the market, and I know that some have applied for the entitlement changes and zoning variances to get the mixed use multifamily residential, but I would think that affordable housing would have some play in incentivizing some of these developers to do something like that in some of these areas where the retail centers not coming back. Sears is not coming back. What do you think about that? What's your opinion?
An interesting question. That's an interesting question. I personally don't think I've seen a lot of that. But the way you asked that makes me think that you've seen some of that. That's something I'd have to look into. That's an interesting one.
Yeah, there's just, it seems to be, I come across a lot of commercial space that's vacant, large, I wouldn't know how many square feet, but look at the Kmart's and the Sears entities in certain areas where, like in Long Beach, we have them in residential areas where, affordable housing would be a really good play because of all the above reasons. Just to see if the government would be involved, like Long Beach, for example, took a bunch of money, and so they're required to allow for affordable housing. Now, whether that happens or not, I don't know, but I know that because it's rubs up right against the residential areas, it has more of a chance than, like a strip mall in the middle of nowhere.
To be completely honest with you, I haven't given it a tremendous amount of thought.
Okay.
I apologize. That's new. Interesting though. I had to look into that.
Question.
By the way, Manny, I have a hard stop at 2, so just
Yeah, we
a forewarning.
I want to ask you if you just sum it up, last words you want to say, and we'll let you go.
Yeah, I mean, I would say, we're becoming increasingly more active. Right now I'm looking at the moment at 5 or 6 things at the same time. And that's not something that would have been the case a couple of months ago. And I expect that to increase as we go forward. Given the nature of how we allocate capital, we rely a lot on our partners to do a lot of the upfront detail digging for us. It's difficult to get super deep into the, like Mike said, into the tenant profiles in a particular multifamily building, and do it on multiple properties at once every week. So we rely a lot on our partners, and so we're looking for very good partners, very diligent partners who When they present with us with a budget, it's going to be the actual budget. Partners who are experienced in a particular market, and we're looking for opportunities of capital dislocation. Owners and operators who are undercapitalized, either in existing properties or in properties that are distressed and available for acquisition. And so I think there are opportunities increasingly to put money to work, and we're looking to do that. I think there are going to be opportunities for everybody here to do that. There are certain product types where I think the returns could be outsized if you're right. If you acquire the right hotel, I think you can make a lot of money, but it has to be the right hotel. For example, a hotel that relies a lot on convention business is going to be a very different profile to a hotel that relies a lot on tourist business. And so those are the sorts of things where it will take some specialized knowledge to really understand the opportunities. And I think it's exciting. I mean, I think there are a lot of things out there that are very promising. And I do think, strategically speaking, if you're building a portfolio, and I know a lot of us are just, are looking for good deals because we're not putting out $1 billion. But from the institutional side, you sort of have to balance it out. And so we're looking at that balance, and we have the luxury of going after, a 8 to 10% yielding multifamily property and also 18 to 20% hotel, and put them in the same pile. And so I think that kind of diversity can also be helpful, because similar to what we're seeing in the overall economy, there's going to be this sort of division between markets and product types. And even from market to market, there's going to be huge discrepancies. For example, you can compare the San Francisco office market to the office market in Denver, and there's a huge discrepancy there. And so I think those discrepancies are potentially opportunities. So we're looking at all that.
All right. Well, I'm going to do this pitch right now. I got a small hotel on the Las Vegas Strip. It's called the Venetian. Okay, $6 billion. I'll get you a great deal. $6 billion. I'll probably knock $500 million off, but $5.5 billion. You want a Venetian? I got you.
If you throw in dinner, I'll do it.
You got it, man. You got it.
Well, David Cerruti with Partners Group, AW Capital Management. I want to thank you for the amazing insight, really, in your time. I know it's valuable, so appreciate it. And Michael 𝐑𝐞𝐚𝐜, thanks again for the intro and for helping to moderate and ask amazing questions. And thanks everybody for being on the call. And keep pushing, keep studying, keep learning what's out there, and find the right partners. And let's conquer 2021. It's almost here. It's gonna be.
Let's do it, baby.
Do it. Thank you, David. Appreciate your time today, brother.
Thanks, Mike, and thank you, Manny. Thank you, everybody, for. Thank you, everybody. This was.
Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Bye,
guys.